Okay. In my left hand, I have a copy of The Cars, Let the Stories Be Told. Bill Janovitz is the author. I talked about this book on the show. I think tweeted about it. Fantastic. Bill, nothing I like better than like a good book about a band. Just the life of a band. Warren Zanes, I thought, did it well in the Petty book. It was almost really about the Heartbreakers as much as Petty. And this is much the same. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I highly recommend if you haven't already read the Mike Campbell book from the inside.
Just read it last year. Yeah, or never came out this year. Was it? It just came out, right? Yeah, I read it. It's great.
Past summer. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. It did a lot of parallels with the Cars for sure.
That's true. Yeah. So why? I guess the obvious first question: why the Cars?
Well, I kind of start the book by talking about what they meant to me. I mean, they basically bookended. I don't know what age you are. I'm 59. They bookended my adolescence. So that first record came out when I was 12. Heartbeat City with Drive, etc. comes out when I'm a senior in high school. So it's like that's basically my entire 80s. Like a lot of other people, but it just sort of mapped so they meant a great deal to me. And as I became more of a musician myself and a guitar player, I really, got into specifically Elliot Easton's playing as a guitar player, but also just could start to discern the different things that the Cars were doing. And then, you get to a certain age, you start going back and discovering all these more avant-garde influences that they brought to the mainstream. I mean, it was sort of a perfect thing. And then I got to play music myself with Elliot Easton out in Los Angeles for a benefit. And I just thought, well, this is a great subject for a book. I couldn't believe that there wasn't really a newish definitive Cars book.
Right. Yeah. So I'm 50. I'll be 51 in a couple of days. So the Cars came to me. Yeah, you're right. The Cars came to me at Heartbeat City. That was kind of when I started becoming a huge music fan. So it's kind of like it is for the other people I love. That I thought this was just like whatever the Thompson Twins or something. Oh, here's a new band, the Cars. Like I didn't know any better. And then you go backwards as you get older, but they were, as you know, and you write about in the book, that era especially, we'll go backwards after this, but like the Heartbeat City era, especially with MTV, they were everywhere. Like you could not avoid them for that. I think from the first single to the last single, and I think it was like 14, 16 months. Like they were around for that long.
Yeah. I mean, their video for, you might think, beat out Michael Jackson's Thriller stuff, among others, for video music of the inaugural video of the year for MTV. And they were making videos before MTV existed, with the help of specifically Jerry Casale of Devo, and Devo were obviously making these like little short films almost as art projects in the 70s. So
he directed some of their videos you wrote. Yeah, right.
Right. He literally helped them. He directed their first two scripted videos on Panorama, which was their third album. So that was a full year before MTV even debuted. So by the time MTV did come on, they it was a content machine. They needed videos, and there weren't that many made. So relatively speaking, so bands like Devo, and a lot of new wave bands in particular, Petty, who was kind of considered almost new wave back then. Yeah, it's funny stuff. But I mean, it's like all those bands were sort of the beneficiaries of this new medium that was national.
Right. Was and you're right about this a little bit. Was the attitude? So my guy is Springsteen. So like when Born USA came out, my uncle who got me into him was a little older. Like a lot of him and his friends were kind of turned off a little bit in a way by the commercial success of Born USA. Was there some of that with like hardcore Cars fans like yourself? Like people who start with him from the beginning, did they think that Heartbeat City was a sellout album? Did they think that
those are two different questions, actually. I mean,
right. That's fair. Yeah.
Because their first album comes out, it sells 6 million. It came out in June. It was gold by October. It was platinum by December. And
the first three songs on that album are all Jimmy still play today everywhere.
The whole record.
It's true.
They jokingly refer to it as their greatest hits album. Yeah. So they made those first 4 records up until Heartbeat City with Roy Thomas Baker, who had produced Queen, among other people, and among other artists, and was kind of got this huge kind of sound, when needed. With Queen, it was kind of huge from the go. Everything is sort of like over the top. But with the Cars, he saw an opportunity to kind of pare it down and then like find these big moments to sort of explode, like the vocals on Good Times Roll. But they hooked up with finally a new producer, Mutt Lange, who had done AC/DC and had just come off of a huge worldwide gigantic success with Def Leppard's Pyromania. Yeah. Right. So, but he had come up with this new sort of early digital sound, rather, not early 80s, but early digital sound, which was still kind of ticky-tacky sounding, you know? So, I mean, you know, I was 17 or so. I considered myself fairly hip at that point, even though I wasn't, and I looked like Anthony Michael Hall from 16 Candles.
But Anthony Michael Hall, by the way, who played Mutt Lange in the Def Leppard VH1 movie.
I had no idea.
Full circle. The same year, Anthony Michael Hall played Mutt Lange and Whitey Ford. He played Whitey Ford in the Billy Crystal.
Oh, you're blowing my mind. I had no idea.
Full circle. Yeah. Go ahead though.
But anyway, when that production came out, like I wasn't a fan of Def Leppard. I was more into sort of like garagey guitar, you know, clangy and almost punk rock stuff, or definitely some punk rock stuff. So by the time that record came out, it just had this like. Like, you know, if you remember, the charts were Thompson Twins. It had Rockwell. If somebody's watching over me, a lot of light synth pop. And I thought that record went too much in that direction. But I did love Drive, especially, and I liked a lot of this. You know, Magic was sort of a classic car song, but it's only sort of in hindsight that I go back and go, you know what? This is a great collection of songs. Yeah, the production is sort of instantly dated, but it's still an amazing record. It's hard to argue with that.
You know what's crazy as a kid? You write about this in the book. When I was a little kid, I had no idea that somebody else sang Drive. Like, I just figured as a little kid, I was like, oh, it's the weird guy who walks on water in the Magic video. Like, he's in the video so much. Like, it doesn't. You write about this in the book too. That a lot of people didn't understand that they had more than one lead singer. Obviously, they did. They had two great, distinctively different, which is weird now as an older person. You can hear it, but is sort of the height of the MTV and all of it. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know who Benjamin Orr was.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, well, Benjamin Orr was the Adonis of the band. I mean, he was like, it's like as if he was always in the soft focus. He was just a beautiful guy and with a natural voice. And so when, you know, certainly women and girls knew who he was, but there was no, like, you know, the videos didn't start until their third album. So it was all photos from especially just album cover stuff. And then like, you know, magazines like Trouser Press or Rolling Stone. So, but yeah, like it's funny because, you know, the thing is Rick wrote all the songs, Rick Ocasek. So he wrote for his own sort of melodic sensibilities. So when Ben, even though he had much more of a range, he was kind of singing the melodies that Rick wrote. So yeah, they kind of blend together. Plus there's so many overlapping voices, but it's like, you know, when you were a kid, you remember when you learned that which songs Paul McCartney was singing versus John Lennon versus George Harrison. I mean, you know, then you hear them and you're like, how did I not hear that? Right. It's like, it's like seeing Where's Waldo. It's like, oh, there he is. But it's but the videos became a real eventual sore point because they went from representing the whole band to increasingly just representing Rick. And so much so that Drive starts off with the lead singer, Ben, sitting at a table. There's a kind of a crane 360 shot. And then it quickly veers into this whole sort of psychodrama between Rick and his eventual widow, Paulina Portiskova, which was the video on which they met.
This book is so, like, the amount of research, I mean, we're talking about going back to everyone's childhood, their early bands, the bands they had to, I mean, this project must have taken years, no?
A couple of years. I mean, nothing major. My previous book was on Leon Russell. And
Leon Russell one? Yeah.
That took about that. Yeah. That took probably 3+ years. Just some of it was just getting it edited down from a manuscript. This, you know, like
right.
to, you know, cause I had so many interviews, like 140 interviews, including Springsteen, Elton John, Clapton. It's like, how much of this do you cut out? You know, that's right. And that was, but this one, I was really lucky and fortunate to have the participation of the 3 surviving members, Greg Hawkes, David Robinson, and Elliot Easton. So, you know, that was the bulk of the story. And if there were any discrepancies, of course, I could double check and check against other sources. But I mean, for the most part, they were like 80% or greater consensus on what the story was and what the truth was and what the important themes were. And a lot of it comes down to, you know, now having Rick passed away in 2019, I think they felt freer to tell these stories.
Yeah, it's interesting when you read it, like clearly there's love there, but there is still resentment toward Rick. I mean, there's just natural human, like, he was, it seems like a very complicated guy to deal with. At times good, but at times, legitimate pain in the ass, as people are.
It's an evergreen thing. People ask me, because I've been in a band for almost 40 years now, Buffalo
Right.
Tom, and people ask me, it's like being in a marriage, right? And I'm like, it's nothing like being in a marriage. It's like, the closest thing is like, if you can imagine being in a band where you're three, in this case, or in Cars, five brothers, or like maybe a blended family, like like the Brady Bunch or something. But now you go decide to form a band or form a small business together, and you're always in each other's faces, and and that goes on for a decade or more. In my case, 4 decades. It's like the compounding emotional stuff, and it never goes away. Like those dynamics, those interpersonal dynamics are kind of set early. And it's kind of a classic thing, it's like brothers can be 70 years old, but they could still snipe at each other the same way when they were like 16. And
it's also tough when one of the guys controls the writing and the publishing and is just making more money than the other guys. I mean, it's a tough dynamic.
For sure. And that's an important distinction right there, because it's like, who gets more of the inheritance, right? So if I'm using the family analogy, but no, he wrote the song. So, and like I said, this is one of the parallels with the Petty book. I mean, Petty wrote the songs. Petty put, for the most part, Mike co-wrote a bunch, and they had some co-writes. The Cars had very few co-writes, and the only ones that existed were really with Greg Hawkes, and they're few and far between, but they're important, like Moving in Stereo, for example, that was co-written with Greg. But I mean, you could argue that these parts are that these guys brought to the music, and I do argue.
You write about in the book,
that this deserves at least some revenue, if not songwriting credit. But no, Rick kept 100% of the publishing of the songs that he did not co-write, and so the band. So what most people don't understand that are not involved in music is like publishing is where the real money is, and you often hear like in these old stories of like people selling their publishing for like the cost of a used Econoline van, to get on tour. And then it's like, Petty included. So Petty was going to learn, and Rick Ocasek included.
And Bruce, a lot of guys.
Yeah. Bruce Springsteen. It goes on and on.
What was Rick ever open to a conversation when those guys sit around and say, hey, I did this. I played, my best friend's girl. I made it sound like this instead. Can I get 2% of the revenue going forward?
He wasn't always. It was a closed door. And this is another parallel, is that he was aided and abetted by their manager, Elliot Roberts, who only could relate to sort of solo artists anyway.
Neil Young.
He was really instrumental. Yeah, he was Tom Petty's again, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell. I mean, he co-managed Petty with Tony DeFreitas. But, that was his style. And it was very much like, you're the star. I'm going to hitch my wagon to you, and you write the songs. So, but when they did finally sit down around Heartbeat City, this is really where it starts to all fall apart for the band. They really kind of did start to speak up more. And David Robinson was always a bit of a squeaky wheel on the drums, just about what he thought is he needed to be a check on Rick's growing megalomaniac power of the band, So, but no, they finally sat down and said, hey, listen, can we peel off a little bit? Because they were touring less and less, and they should, for a band their size, they really should have been on the road more, because it could have just gotten bigger and bigger. And they only toured Europe once in 1978, and that was it.
Why are you right about that in the book? Why was Rick just didn't want to do it? Because I mean, they were a monster band.
Yeah, I mean, Rick didn't see himself as a performer. He was a real introvert, a real guy, one of these guys that wants to just be in the studio writing and recording, and that's kind of it. I mean, Greg was sort of like that too, and this is kind of, this is what people that saw them in the day, everybody will tell you, they were kind of boring live. Some of that was by design, this sort of cliche rock star thing. We're not going to shout out Hello Cleveland kind of stuff, but it became like extreme, like they barely said anything to the crowd. And, they're playing arenas by their middle of their first record tour. But yeah, they hit it big, and they got spoiled in America. And I'm talking about mainly Rick. So when he had to choose his spots to tour, he just like, well, no, we just stay in America, keep it easy, But they could have gone to Australia. They could have gone they went to Japan once, and they went to the UK once. But I mean, they could have been, they were giant stars here, and they were pretty big in the world. And so they would have played gigantic places over there, but Rick just wanted to limit the touring, and MTV helped with that. MTV was like, you didn't have to go out and hit every sort of Midwestern town anymore, because they were seeing the Cars and buying the records anyway.
It is funny. Like they were a success right away, but it is interesting to read about the slow climb before they became a band. They were just figuring it out. Like it is interesting. I mean, the influences they had and how they found each other and how they kind of took off. And knowing the whole time too, it's kind of funny that Rick is older than he's saying he is. Just a lot of dynamics going on. But when they started as a band, was that power dynamic already in place?
Well, yeah, I mean, you raise an important theme here. It's like people seem to think that, or thought they were like this overnight success, and that's the way they wanted to represent themselves. That they came out of nowhere. That Rick was not 33 years old,
right.
Which at the time, people were slag. Like I remember, because I was 12 and a Stones fan. People like, aren't these guys too old, the Stones, to put out another record? Some girls are like, how long can they keep doing this? They're in their 30s, for Christ's sake. That's how rock and roll was still relatively young. It was only 20, 30 years old. Right. So, people thought it was kind of a passing thing anyway. But, so they kept, that was just part of the secrecy. But yeah, I mean, people only saw the tip of the iceberg. And then, but there were 10 years of Ben Orr and Rick Ocasek together as partners from Ohio, coming to Cambridge and Boston, going through all these different iterations, different styles, from like Crosby, Stills and Nash kind of singer-songwriter stuff to Steely Dan kind of bar band stuff, and even fusion-y kind of weirdo stuff, like Steely Dan kind of stuff. So then they finally strike upon this right combination. And part of it was bringing back Greg Hawkes from an earlier iteration on synths, this great guitar player, rootsy guitar player, Elliot Easton, who offset the sort of new wave-ish sheen, who kind of grounded them in rock and roll. And David Robinson was the big piece at that point, because David Robinson had played with Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. They were kind of legends, I mean, they were covered by the Sex Pistols. Right. And then he was in DMZ, this great punk rock sort of more garage rock band that used to play the Rat and Kenmore Square and everything. Mm-hmm. And they were very influential as well. So he was kind of the guy that had the most real experience. So when he joined, they just all clicked, and it's like they couldn't believe. And plus, Rick's songwriting he just distilled it to these amazing kind of brief songs. All of a sudden, he found his thing at the age of the young age of 33.
Well, I mean, he had a family. Like he just left kids. Just was like, this is my life. I'm moving to Cambridge. I'm turning my back on what, 2 little kids, I think, right?
He had 2 kids and a wife that he left behind in Ohio, and his own bandmates, probably with the exception of Ben, his own bandmates had no idea. And he came with his new wife, Suzanne, who basically stayed with him until Paulina in 1983 or so. But yeah, he was a compartmentalizer. Like he was really like, he basically boxed up his past and moved on from it. And yeah, Greg Hawkes tells a story in the book. He's like, they're on their like second record. They're on the tour. And he's like, yeah, my son's going to meet us here. And he's like, son? He's like, at that point, the only son that Greg knew was like, 3 or 4 years old at the time. Right. He's like, how's this going to work? He goes, no, I have another son. And then he only later found out that he had 2 sons back in Ohio.
Right. Do you think, let's say, Orr and Rick are totally healthy now? Like, would any chance to be one of these bands right now that's out there touring greatest hits tours, or was that just not the way he did it?
I think there'd be a chance, a very slim chance. I mean, they did do it in 2011 without Ben. I mean, This is an important thing in the book as well. This is why this band is so important as a band. It was always the same 5 members. They when Ben died, they didn't try to replace him with somebody. They did. That's true. They did do a record and a tour in 2011.
Very small tour, right?
Very small tour. I think 11 shows or something like that. 12 shows. So there you go. And plus, he would have been at this point. Rick would be in his early 80s, I think. So I don't.
Although in today's world, Bruce is 70s, McCartney's out there. It is like there's no
Dylan will die on the stage. Yeah,
Dylan's probably playing somewhere in North Dakota tonight or something.
Hey man, Willie Nelson's what, 91, 92?
Right. That's what I mean. It's crazy. Yeah. Did the relationship with Rick and the other guys but did they know he was sick?
No, even Paulina. Paulina knew. Paulina Portiscova knew. Yep. They were getting separated at the time as well. They were already separated. I mean, she talks about like discovering antidepressant pills in his bag and one of his duffel bags, and him not sharing that. You know, he kind of led this a need to know basis life, you know. But no, I don't think his bandmates knew. I mean, they talk about him on that little 2011 tour, still sneaking cigarettes, because it was ultimately the effects of emphysema and clogged arteries that took his life, heart attack or whatever. They didn't realize. I mean, they didn't realize he had cancer. There was a small cancerous tumor removed from his lung, and that kind of was the end. It kind of he didn't recover from that surgery really. But no, the band didn't know.
The great part about the book is like there's just so many characters, and radio is such a big part of their rise. And there's DJs from Ohio and from BCN and from all like they really were sort of an underground band for a while who everybody in Boston knew. And then they realized, like, finally kind of the rest of the country found out. But, this is a story of, like, how a band grows. It obviously doesn't happen this way nowadays, but, like, BCM would play them all the time. Like that.
Specifically, Maxine Sartori, who was all of, like, 22 years old when BCN brought her out because they needed to get a female period, never mind on air. They had no women really working there. In any kind of positions of power. So she came out and she didn't only break the Cars, she broke Aerosmith, and she more or less was instrumental, if not like one of the most influential people in breaking Queen and Springsteen in America. They all give her shout outs. I mean, she was playing those guys. And this is the thing, BCN was this powerful, very influential FM station in the earliest days of this of FM being like these kind of great freeform rock stations that we, maybe you have that on college radio now, but that's about it. But they were huge powerhouses, and they influenced others. And she was playing their demo of Just What I Needed. And so just based on their demo from forming to, like, within 6 months, they were filling clubs in Boston, including like the Paradise eventually, before they had an album. And the A&R guys came sniffing around, of course, quite quickly.
But it almost feels like Rick was happier, producing Suicide than working with the Cars sometimes. I felt like that he was more of a tinkerer. He enjoyed that part of his career, maybe more.
He loved the adulation. He loved the attention. That's what he liked about being on the road, to get a bit of that. He didn't love the actual playing the music part so much, but he did love writing and recording. No, he loved making music with the Cars for sure. It was a passion. But he really got the studio bug pretty early on. I think he always did. I mean, he was always really interested in electronics and stuff like that. And he was always, even as a kid, he was in the basement doing electronics or doing photography, black and white, kind of developing stuff, darkroom stuff. So that was who he was. And the Cars, they were kind of a more or less happy band right through their first 3 records. It was only around the 4th that dissension started to get sown. But yeah, he, as Paulina told me, he mistook adulation for love. He kind of equated those things. So so like all these younger and underground artists kind of did really look up to him. I mean, Suicide were more of his. They were, I mean, even Alan Vega was, even older. They were even older than he was, but they really kind of were very grateful for his help. I mean, not only did he produce them, but he put them on as the opening band, and they were like this really provocative duo.
Yeah, that's wild.
You could see a little bit of video. I mean, people were throwing glass ashtrays at them at the Paradise in Boston, and they were like, you suck just like your Red Sox, they would say.
Well, it's a good I mean, it's funny with them right now with this book, and then the Zane's book, and now the movie out too is with Nebraska is it's sort of a little revival for them. And Springsteen, played Dream Baby Dream I didn't know them at all until the Devils and Dust tour when Springsteen played that. And I mean, what a great band they were, a great duo they were. Jesus.
Yeah, they were really influential. I mean, they did sort of one or two kind of things, It's like you hear them and you go, that's Suicide. Except for like the Cars song "Shooby Doo," which is an homage to Suicide. It's like it's so close to sounding like Suicide, which is like this primitive drum machine and these yelps, and that's where the the Nebraska influence comes from. It's like, whoa, like this rockabilly.
State Trooper. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like rockabilly mixed with electronica. I mean, they were very influential. And Martin Rev is still around. And Marty Rev, the guy that did the sounds, Alan Vega was an artist, a visual artist, as well as a front man for Suicide. But yeah, it is cool to see them getting more attention for sure.
What was the critical consensus of the Cars at the time? Were they a critic's favorite all the way through, or was it more early on, or were they?
Like a lot of bands, they get built up, sort of like the critics love to be the ones that discover them and turn people on to them. And then as they get successful, and there's one critic in particular that because I don't go too deep into the past, because it's easy to take pot shots at critics from like 40 years later when they're writing about something contemporaneously. It's like, they're making a judgment. But there's one critic in particular who is like, he was championing them for a pretty influential New York area thing called New York Rocker, a great publication that was sort of like the Village Voice, but just for music. And he was like, are they too accessible sounding? Are they gonna be filling arenas? And if they're filling arenas, what's to stop, like, say, even like Talking Heads or Blondie? And of course, all those bands did fill arenas later on. So it's like this hand wringing. No, the critics, the critical, there was no consensus by like the second or third record when they really started to kind of divide the room, especially the third record, because they took a little bit of a left turn to make it more electronic and a little bit less organic sounding than the others.
What is your favorite Cars album?
I'm still partial to the first one. I mean, I love
it's a great record,
Candy-O almost as much as the debut, but it's a flawless record, and it just sounds killer on the radio, on the turntable. It's just this punchy. It's got all my favorite elements of rock and roll. Really, kind of this great guitar, bass, drum combo. Vocals are insane. The production is just killer.
It's kind of timeless too. Like, if you hear those songs like now, it's they still sound fantastic. It's not that doesn't sound like it's well. How old is that now? Jesus,
1978. So what?
47 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
It is timeless. It's. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Those records are timeless. I mean, even Panorama, which sounded very new at the time, is pretty timeless sounding. It doesn't sound unlike Heartbeat City, which to me sounds dated. But those sounds, even those kind of cheesy 80s sounds have come back. Very much so. But there's like, I mean, to give you evidence of the timelessness of the sound of that first record, you've got Olivia Rodrigo doing stuff that sounds like Weezer, sounding like the Cars, or sounding like
right,
the Breeders, or it's that kind of gritty guitar with just massive drums and great synth stuff overlaying it.
Yeah, I would you say they're? It's hard to say, but like, would you say they're? I feel like every great band, whether you like them or not, whether it's even their best song or not, like Springsteen is attached to Born to Run, the Eagles, Hotel California, Billy Joel, Piano Man. The Cars, like, is Drive that song, or are they one of these bands that's not necessarily? There's no signature. You know what I'm saying? I feel like most people have that kind of song that when you think of the like, if you're not a huge fan, it's that song.
Yeah, I think it's just what I needed, maybe more so than Drive. But Drive was.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, I say in the book, it's very rare to still have to come back with one of your biggest hit records on your fifth album, and they never really took a step backwards, except for no. I mean, they kept sort of. I mean, every record was platinum or multi-platinum, until the record after Heartbeat City, which is called Door to Door, which was like kind of them breaking up. So. But Drive definitely is, to me, one of their signature songs. It's up there in the top 3 or however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like one of the greatest ballads of all time, and probably my favorite ballad of the 1980s.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, he sounds unbelievable. It's crazy. So is that the next album, Door to Door? Is that the one at that point where they're doing a tour that's not being advertised? You said there's some shows where there's like 120 people in Cincinnati or something, like a stadium or a basketball arena?
Yeah, it was grim. And I don't know if it was 120, but it probably felt like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you read accounts of that and you talk to these guys and it still scars them to this day. It's like, I mean, David is more, I don't want to say conspiratorial minded, but he, just for example, like they were talking about one other thing where they go to France to just do a press tour, and Rick ends up doing every interview, and it's still a burr in David's side today. But I mean, I was talking to Elliot about it, and he's like, yeah, no, he's right. David's right, but I don't think it was as diabolical as he thought it was. But there was something that felt diabolical about Door to Door. First of all, Rick was completely enthralled with this new 19-year-old model, supermodel named Paulina Porskova. He wasn't writing as much. He was going through a divorce. So they came back, and that now the band is starting to argue not only for publishing, but for writing. And this was the time where he really could have used the help of his bandmates with material, because it was the first record, as Elliot said, that they came back where they did all songs that had been rejected for previous records. So not only was it new, but they were all rejects from previous records. And which is not to say that it's all bad. It's not. But it was not a great effort, certainly not a great follow-up to a massive worldwide hit like Heartbeat City. I mean, they came off of Live Aid on that record. So it's like they were known around the world. And what a weird record to follow it up with. But I think Rick really thought of himself as, if not Tom Petty, more like Sting. He said in an article around that time, he said, well, Sting really had to leave the Police to sort of go out and establish himself as a solo star. And that's really how Rick saw his path, and it never came to fruition.
But, like a song like Emotion might as well be a Cars song.
Yeah, but there's fewer I mean, I think that most of his solo material, and I can't say that I've listened like as much as I have to the Cars for sure. Yeah. But I definitely gave these albums deep listens, repeated listens for the book. But I find that most that song could be a Cars first, absolutely. But there's other songs that are just like, they're just flat, sort of, as David and Greg said, these sounded like what Rick would bring us for demos, which they didn't have dynamics, they didn't have color, they didn't have like the color and form that these other guys would bring them. They didn't have the arrangements that they would kind of pull together. All together. So they were flat sounding. And that's, I think there's some great songs among them. Absolutely. But it's just not as consistent or as immediate as the Cars.
It's a funny thing in rock, in band, I guess just in all music probably, but like there is that need almost always for that guy, again, whether it's Bruce or Petty or Rick or whoever, they feel like they have to leave the band and try solo. And almost always it's just not as good. Like there's just something about a band being there together, making that music. It's just not going to be as good, but they always seem resistant. They always feel like they have to try it, I guess, which I guess human nature, I understand, I guess.
Yeah. It's hard to generalize about that. Cause for me, like I'm not a gigantic E Street Band fan, but I'm a big Bruce fan. And my two favorite Bruce records, and I'm not just trying to be contrarian to these like big records, but my two favorite records of his are Nebraska and Tunnel of Love. Yeah. Even which before solo, right. Yeah, even before Darkness, which I love, and Born to Run, which I also love. But I love because I'm a singer-songwriter guy. Like, it's not to say, I'm a band guy as well, so it's not one or the other. And Petty did Wildflowers, which is
Full Moon Fever was his biggest album.
Right. And of course, Mike Campbell's by his side for most of them. I think
that's true too. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah, that is true.
And Greg Hawkes, by the way, is by Rick's side for most of the solo material as well. So, and he's really he was Rick's kind of music director almost.
He seemed like the guy who probably got along with him best consistently the whole time.
Yeah, I think Greg is just sort of that guy with people in general. He's a real diplomatic, absolutely polite, seemingly. Nobody is without ego completely, but he's just one of those guys that just seems very comfortable in who he is. He doesn't bring a whole lot of insecurities to the table, at least in any obvious way, where everybody else is more just comes across as more or less the kind of humans that you think people are. But there's probably people in, I don't know about your family, but I'm 5 kids, and there's one that gets along with everybody, and he's everybody's favorite, and that's not me. And
same.
So, I divide the room, I think. Right. So, but I think that's who Greg was. Greg relates and still relates to these other guys. I think. This is just an outside observation, but I think he's the more he's got the most. What's the word I'm looking for? Economical? I don't know if that's the word.
Yeah. But I got you.
Diplomatic.
Was there any point when you started thinking about it or thinking about writing this book? Do you thought, well, the most famous guy, in the band and the other guy, they're both dead. Like, is it, was there any part that's like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't because I can't talk to these guys? Or are you confident that having the other guys and all this other stuff that you'd be okay to pull it off? Which
yeah, that's a great question, Kirk. I mean, I first pitched this book when Rick was still alive in 2019, because that's when I met Elliot, and this gave me a very early glimpse into the band's dynamic. Rick being the control freak and the oldest guy in the band, and Elliot being the sort of put upon younger brother. 9 years difference between these two guys, and Elliot reported back to me. He's like, "Oh, Rick would never let me be the guy that chooses, or brings an author idea to the table. It has to be all Rick down, top down." Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Rick would want, from what I've discovered about Rick, I'm pretty sure he would not want this kind of book. Never mind
warts and all.
Yeah, warts and all kind of book. Whereas these guys were all like, they didn't give me any grief really about anything I wrote about them. I gave them one of the final drafts to just sort of answer to and maybe do some fact checking for. And they didn't say anything that was insulting to them. There's like, unless it was completely, actually there was no qualifications there. But I think Rick would have been, he would want more of a hagiography, like, just something that told this great story of the band and him in particular. I think, but yeah, to your more important question though, how do I feel as an author with those two guys not being there? Well, yeah, I mean, my job is to sort of be as fair to them as possible. And part of that is going to all the people that I could that really knew them well. And I even approached his kids, none of whom really got back to me. So, I mean, Rick's in particular. But, I talked to Ben's exes, I talked to Rick's exes. And I felt like Paulina gave me a really great, Paulina wrote this book and
a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, a very good book. And she was infamously, not infamously, she wasn't infamously, but it was sort of well publicized that Rick had written her out of the last version of his will. I mean, it's far more nuanced than that. I mean, she basically she got the estates but she didn't get and when I say the estates, I mean the homes. She didn't get a part of his publishing estate, which just sold last year for $45 million or something like that. So a pretty large amount of money. But she gave me a really good balance, like the good and the bad. I mean, the bad. Yeah. So she's been known for, giving the sort of sad side of this breakup of the marriage and the family. But she gave me a really good overview of who he was, including his childhood. I mean, they were together from 1983 to 2018, basically. So I think she had and she's so emotionally intelligent and able to articulate this stuff so well that I felt like, but it wasn't just her. I talked to as many people. Like I talked to his best friend for all these years. And never mind. It was like a lot of people. B.B. Buell, who was a buddy of his. So you start to put together a picture. And if somebody is a little bit off the reservation in terms of their opinion vis-a-vis everybody else's, then you go, okay, maybe that I got to mitigate that, or
right.
It's really about, yeah, exactly. It's coming to the consensus. And I feel like most of the book, I didn't feel like there was much of a struggle there. I felt like we got to the truth. Now, would I love for these guys to be around to answer to this stuff? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would have.
But you're right. Sometimes you get obviously better truth not talk. I will say, I thought Paulina comes across well with the book. Much better. She did a story maybe in the New York Times Magazine a couple of years ago. I thought she came across better in this book. I did feel bad. It sounds like he porked over a couple of his other kids, though. Pretty good in this estate, though, as you're right about.
Yeah, she wrote, she told me, in the news, you'll see, and his son, Christopher, his firststyrone, he's on Instagram, and he's got a picture of, you see that? He's got a picture of a wig on a styrofoam head, and there's a logo. It says "Sir Neglect a Lot." That's actually kind and humorous the way he was treated. I mean, he wrote those two guys out of the will completely. So I asked Paulina, I said, well, how would you characterize him as a father? And she said, and she paused and she really gave this some thought. And she said, I would say he was a horrible father to his first kids, a mediocre father to his second kids, and a fantastic father to his last two kids. And Oliver has been taking his oldest of his last two kids with Paulina. I think he's the older. has been on Instagram quite a bit, kind of, you know, reclaiming a bit of his dad's legacy, I think, and explaining a bit more, but just more having fun.
Yeah. What did you think of their performance of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I just watched it again. Reading your book, I hadn't watched it in years, so I watched it again.
Oh, I loved it. I mean, it's one of those things where it's just like gravy. You got a smile on your face. They've got Scott from Weezer on bass, and I mean, the induction though, that was the speeches. That was
well, yeah. That's so reading the book, I didn't know this initially. So in the book, it's clear, you know, who inducted? Was it Weezer? No, who inducted them?
No, it was the Killers guy, Brandon Flowers.
Oh, Brandon Flowers. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, you could tell the story, but yeah, the body language and the talking to him is very apparent, which I didn't realize the first time.
Yeah, I mean, they're all giving these heartfelt speeches. None more heartfelt than Elliot's, who goes on to he gives a shout out to Maxanne, the woman that played them on BCN. I mean, all the way back, his mother. He tells this amazing story about his mother and how much she would have loved to be there to see it. She was a singer herself, and Rick is in the back, like he's like, it's you can't believe that he's doing it. It's like this,
it's crazy.
It really is, right? Like this grown man, old man, really, like going out of his way to show the world that he's not listening to the speech. And not only not listening, but he's talking to Brandon Flowers, whispering things in his ear and stuff. And Brandon starts to look very quickly uncomfortable, like as if I make the analogy. Imagine you're at this like, you know, quiet, like acoustic performance by this solo artist, and there's your friend is drunk and yelling in your ear, and you're like, you're embarrassed for him, but you're embarrassed for yourself. Everybody's looking at you, and that's kind of what it's like. And Elliot said, you know, he didn't know about it until after it. He's like, you know, what the hell? And then to put salt in the wound, Rick finally comes up to give his speech, and he thanks everybody but Elliot. It's like this incredibly petty. And I said to them, I said, he wouldn't be that petty, would he? And you know, I said it to even Paulina. I said, well, you know, she goes, you know, I never noticed that because I was too busy noticing that Rick didn't say anything about me.
About her, right?
And he didn't thank me at all. Yeah, about her. So yeah, it's just a sad kind of way to go out, man. I mean, that was a year or so before he passed away. And you know, Elliot told me, I don't know if it's in the book, but Elliot told me later, maybe I just found out about it after the book. He goes, you know, afterwards we talked about that. And I feel like we finally got the air cleared. But I told him, I said, you know, you made me feel really bad by doing that. And Rick said, I don't need to be reminded of my failures or my, you know, my you know, he I don't know if it was an apology so much of a, I know it's one of my deficiencies. And, you know, it's just a sad way to be. Another great thing that Elliot said to me recently was like, you know, it was as if somebody was always trying to take something away from Rick. It was this deep insecurity that, you know, he had gone through all this poverty. He came from bad childhood, not the worst of childhoods. A lot of people have gone through bad childhoods. It doesn't excuse bad behavior. But I think he had deep mental issues.
Not that it really matters, but why did it take so long for the Cars again, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Like what the fuck?
I don't know, man. It's like
I mean, I know it's so dumb, but like the Cars, like I don't really.
It's so silly. It's one of the most. It's just if you're going to exist as this sort of arbiter of Hall of Fame type thing. It's not like, you know, these sports halls of fame where you've got stats and it's like, it's 500. It's only about personality. Yeah. It's only about personalities when you talk about steroids or gambling or whatever. With this, it's like just stupid subjective stuff. It's all politics. I mean, you know, the Jan Wenner stuff is real, is very much real. I talked to John Landau, who's Springsteen's guy for the Leon Russell book, because Leon, of all people,
took him forever.
He checked every box, and they still only put him in as like a side man. You know, this guy was filling arenas on his own. It's just so stupid. But I was talking with John Landau. We're on first name basis, John.
Sure, of course. Right.
talking to Landau, I said, so why do you? He goes, well, now he's been on the nominating committee since its inception, I believe. And he said, I wish I could tell you. I can't tell you anything about the deliberations that go on. He goes, but I've been trying to get my best friend, Peter Wolf of Jay Giles Band, you know, and the Jay Giles Band.
They should absolutely be in.
It's just ridiculous, right? And then
everyone's in. Well, I mean, right. But then you start demeaning people, and I don't want to play that game, but it's like,
No, exactly.
if Janet Jackson, who's great, she has fans, but she's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, I mean, it becomes like a.
Well, then you're like, yeah, what is the Hall of Fame? Maybe they should just call it the Pop Music Hall of Fame.
Just music or whatever.
Yeah, popular music Hall of Fame.
And they were another band too. That's a crazy thing at the time. My uncle telling me he saw Aerosmith in Boston play Battle of the Bands at Campy Lake Park. Like, you had this crazy Aerosmith, Boston, Jay Giles, Cars, this Boston moment in time that you capture so well too, is sort of this Boston explosion in the 70s.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was part of this great scene afterwards, but it was like much smaller. You know, it was like it was the Pixies, Throwing Muses, Lemonheads, Buffalo Tom, Dinosaur Jr.
Sure,
to some extent.
Great bands, but
but none of us achieved. You know, I mean, the
commercials,
Pixies,
commercial stratosphere, like Centerfold is a massive. You know, they were just.
We're talking about worldwide, international giants for sure.
Freeze Frame and The
70s was very kind to Boston.
But they were great. Yeah, they're a great band too. It's sad, so reading the book, when I read the book, which I devoured. So you read the book, you put a pin and you look up things. So I like the YouTube interview with Orr when he's dying with the band. Like, you watch stuff like this, you think, Jesus, so goddamn depressing watching this this poor guy suffer. He could barely speak. He was so sick at the end. Do you feel like he got a measure of closure with the band?
Yeah, I think that's the one upside there. They came down. They wanted to do an interview for a Rhino Records release,
a live one or something.
Yeah, the video. Yeah. So they interviewed with Brett Milano, a longtime Boston music journalist, and they did it in Atlanta where Ben was, because they knew he was sick. They just had no idea, like, the depths of his illness or the ravages that it had taken on him, and he's a skeletal. It's haunting, and I talk about watching it and watching each member as they react and kind of try to carry on normally. And Greg Hawkes is absolutely mum and haunt. You could see it's like as if he's looking at a ghost, and it really did it. He talks about how much that affected it affected him. And then you've got Elliot just sort of like trying to keep it all light and talk about the old stories like that, like just trying to move on here. And then Rick being odd about, in his own way. But the closure came with Rick and Ben. None of the three surviving members rather, know the content of the conversation, but they did see them go off to a bar the night before when they were all done.
Dinner or something you wrote? Yeah, they like a big dinner or something.
And have a little heart-to-heart chat. And they hadn't spoken to each other for, I think, 13, 14, 15 years, the two of them. And those were the two real brothers that had come out from Ohio together, So there's a lot to it. I mean, Rick did reach out to Ben during the 90s, tried to call him, and Ben wouldn't have it at all. So it's just a family tragedy kind of story,
Yeah. It's just, like I said, it's a great band story. What is, to you, sort of, what's their legacy? Where, if you say, what are the Cars, what's their legacy in music? Yeah.
I mean, to me, I don't want to compare them to the Beatles, but only in a limited way, that they really did bring the underground above ground. There's relatively few acts that do that. There's a lot of acts bands and artists that synthesize other people. I mean, that's what you do. That's what you would do as an artist. You take all these other elements from people and you make it your own. But the Cars brought like this really cool sort of thing that was really underground, punk rock and art rock. Like, one of the guys that I interviewed that worked with them later on said, when I heard the first Cars record, I said, oh man, Roxy Music is going to break in America. This is the first great Roxy Music record. So they took like these Roxy Music, Brian Ferry, Brian Eno, Bowie influences, whatever, and brought it even more mainstream. So to me, their legacy is just this timeless music. Like you, unlike almost any band that you consider an 80s band, you put them on or you hear them come on the radio and you go, this sits between Jumpin' Jack Flash and whatever's new today, Weezer in the 90s and Olivia Rodrigo today. And it sounds like it could be a top 40 hit today if it came out, right? I mean, until Heartbeat City, and then Heartbeat City has its own great flavor, but what a collection of songs and records.
What's all right? So you did Russell, you did this. Do we know what's next? Are we kicking around ideas?
I wish I did. I gotta start hustling here. But I mean, it's a matter of finding somebody that wants to cooperate. I think for the most part,
Yeah,
and big enough to sort of sell some books, because I got to sell to a publisher, and then
sure.
I got to devote 2 years of my life or more to it too. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a tricky balance, especially when you're just considering music, you know. But I got some ideas. We'll see what happens.
This one different when you go in, because you knew the guys? Is it different when you go into a book? Put it this way: did you go in thinking like Rick is like this and he had this relationship with these guys, or did you go with an open mind? Like, are you asking questions already with the conclusion in mind, or are you able to kind of put that stuff away? And I'm maybe not phrasing it well.
No. With
Yeah,
this book and Leon Russell, I didn't know I didn't know the guys. I didn't know their personalities at all. I
right.
didn't come in with
Yeah,
preconceptions. I mean, with Leon Russell, I knew like it's what. Here's my answer to your question. It's coming in as like a fan and a curious person that wants to know about them. So anybody,
yeah,
it's like I'm like the reader. I'm like, I want to discover, and I try not to go in with any preconceptions. The danger is, as a musician especially, is thinking I know something, for example, about music, and I'm not like a trained musician. I'm a self-taught for the most part. So it's
Mhm.
like making those kinds of mistakes and then maybe getting too familiar with your subject. Like these three guys being around. I mean, there's a couple of times where I felt like, oh, I got too familiar with one of them, and they
Right.
kind of slapped me down a little bit. And I'm like, no, you're wrong, or you don't. You think you know who I was or how I'd react, but it was no real aggressive slapping down. It was just more like a slap on the wrist kind of thing.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's my answer. It's like with the Stones, I did 2 Stones books before I did the Leon Russell book, and that was more based on received, extensive biographies that I've already read. But I was
Yeah.
writing more about the music and the impact of the music and the context
Right.
of the times, and rather than Mick is this way and Keith that way.
Right.
Even here, I don't report who these guys whom I show don't tell, right? It's like
Yeah.
I'm letting them show who they are or who they thought Rick was, and that kind of thing.
But there's also plenty of room too. Look, if you're a huge Cars fan, I always think like a great band book, it almost doesn't matter if you're a fan of the band or not. It's like reading a great work of drama. Like
Right.
But if you're a big Cars fan, like I am, and other people are, who I would tell to buy this book, there's a lot of time spent on the music as well, though. I mean, literally track by track on the album. So I mean, the music gets plenty of attention too.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with you about same with band docs, especially. Like I've never been a giant Iron Maiden fan, but I mean, I love that documentary.
Right.
Same with Rush, and reading. I was never a Rush fan, but reading Geddy Lee's book, it's just wow. Yeah, exactly. It's all about the writing and the story, and there's so much drama in bands, and for a lot of the reasons we've already discussed.
Yeah, I mean, watch the Eagles documentary. It's unbelievable. It's wild. It's wild.
I like where he says the only people that are nice to you are the people because you write their checks. He goes, I've been writing your check for 10 years, motherfucker.
Poor Don Felder. That was a tough scene. We've had on here as well.
Yeah, Glenn Fry was no shrinking pilot, man.
It's funny. There's always that one guy, though. You talk about David. There's always the one guy in the band, Stan Lynch. Felder's always that one guy who's like, this is kind of fucking. This is kind of fucking bull. I'm sure you know very well. But this is like, you're like, why is this guy driving this fucking car? And it's like, well, I mean, because it's like, well, because he wrote One of These Nights and you didn't. Like eventually it's kind of like, and Fry says in the documentary, he's like, well, it's kind of like not everybody gets to score a touchdown.
Right.
Like some people have to block on the offensive line. I get that I get to do my own show. So, but like, I get how that could be tough for people where you are in your mind the fourth guy in the band. You too is probably the one band who did it right, I guess.
Well, REM, there's a few.
True. Yeah. Right.
Well, but those are bands that really formed organically. There's a real difference between forming a band with your friends and like teaching yourself to be a band kind of thing, rather than like to go through all these different iterations, casting off members, casting off styles. You finally strike upon the right thing, and you make a hit record based on your songs. I could see how an already insecure person would let their ego run away with them, like it did here. With Petty, it's a bit more nuanced because they had kind of grown up a little bit together, but really they were already kind of mercenary back in Gainesville before they even came out to LA, poaching members and things like that. And it was. And we don't need to get too into all this stuff, but Petty, it was really interesting to compare it because Petty was the guy that retained the contract, specifically a writing publishing contract with Shelter, which was Leon Russell's label.
Yeah.
So it all comes back together. But I love hearing Mike Campbell's take on that, like, and basically talking Stan Lynch off the ledge, going, dude, there's going to be so much money. Just don't concentrate on how much more money he's making.
Don't fuck this up. Like, this is a job. Well, that's the thing I think about reading this great book that you wrote, is like, these guys are upset, and I get it, but it's like, you guys were nothing in Heartbeat City. Is like, you guys are monster stars. Like, please, like, just stay out of trouble. But at the same time, I'm thinking, you know what? I'd definitely be bitching too. I would, especially if Rick is so difficult to deal with. There's never a moment where Rick is like, in the book, where he's like, listen, like, I totally get where you're coming from. I know it's frustrating. Like, let's talk about this. Like, he never let them in. So I get where they're coming from.
The door was never open. Yeah. And it's one thing when you're starting out and you're hitching your ride to this great writer, and things are clicking on all cylinders and whatever other cliche you want to use. But like, especially when you're not touring and you've kind of got this rock star lifestyle that you got to maintain, and that gulf of iniquity really starts to grow, and you go, oh my God, look at the Delta. Rick is now got, how many more houses do you need, Rick? And I'm still just in my
married to a model. And for sure. Well, the book is The Cars, Let the Stories Be Told. Bill Janovitz, the writer. The book is a highest 10 out of 10 recommendation.
Oh, thank you so much, Kirk.
It's fantastic. It's great. It's doing well.
Yeah, it's doing well as far as books go nowadays.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But can't recommend enough. And we thank you so much for joining us. Hope we'll talk to you again.
Thanks so much, kid.
All right, Bill. Thank you.
All right. See ya.